Right. Wonderful day, everyone. I'm Deanna C. Hughes, and I have the pleasure of co-chairing the Akuhoa Women in Housing Network alongside Michelle. And we are excited with a little bit of bittersweet that this is our last roundtable for the year. However, it is going to be a phenomenal roundtable conversation. So what I wanted to make some time to share is some things to keep you all connected with us in the meantime, in between time. So for those who have not had an opportunity to know who we are or see some of the things we've been doing in the world of social media, I am going to start to do a bit of copy and pasting in the chat. So please share out and hold fast to this information. So first thing first, if you have questions, comments, want to engage with us via our social media space, as well as in our respective Gmail account, here is how you keep in contact with us. Everyone in the meeting, got it? And then outside of that, for folks who have been a part of our mentor-mentee match initiative, it is still living and breathing, and it is exactly what we make of it. So I also want to share this link so that you can go in and see where there are shared interests, as well as sign up to be a mentor and or a mentee. And then last but certainly not least, we have a survey just to kind of hear from a standpoint of how are we doing? Are we meeting your needs? Do you feel like you have space to communicate with us? How responsive we are? But this survey is for you to let us know. Feedback is love, so please do not hold back. But I wanted to make sure that you all had those 3 points of information. Michelle, was there anything else that we needed to add or share to the squad?
I think we're good. I'm just excited to hear from this incredible panel. Thanks everyone for being here.
Yes. So what I'm going to do now is pass the baton over to Jackie Satera, who will be our moderator for today's panel and the session entitled To Doc or Not. So Jackie, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Deanna, and thanks, Michelle. Thanks for all that you have done and continue to do for the network. So for those of you that I have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Jackie Satera. Apparently Zoom is going by Jacqueline today, which is perfectly fine as well. It changes my name literally every time I log into Zoom. So thank you all so much for being here. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Director of Residential Education at Bucknell University. And I am very excited to be the moderator for today. So we are going to kick things off and have the panelists introduce themselves. And so once they get through their introductions, everyone please feel free in the chat to introduce yourself, share your names, your institution, your pronouns, where you're logging in from today, whatever you want to share with the group. And then after we do introductions, we'll jump right into the questions. And after I ask the first question, I will post it in the chat as well. So if folks want to follow along there. So I will pass it over to Shayna to kick things off with introductions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shayna Alston. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Executive Director of Housing and Residential Education at the University of Denver. I also am in my role as the past chair of the Akuhoa Foundation, and so really excited to be with this amazing group of folks. Just to really briefly share some of the institutions that I've worked with previously. I worked at Temple University and Philadelphia University, which is now known as Thomas Jefferson University, for 8 years respectively. I also worked at Monmouth University and Rutgers State University of New Jersey. I hail from Makuho, that is my home region, but now I'm a part of AIMHO, and I'm excited to be a part of this panel today.
And Deb, we'll go to you next.
Hi, everyone. Deb Schmidt-Rogers. I use the She series. I am at Northwestern University, serving as the Senior Director of the Office of Residential Experience, a relatively new title. We've done some rebranding. So the 2 departments that I'm responsible for would be residential academic engagement. So that's our Res College, our faculty and residents, and our programming model. And then residential community and support, which is Res Life with a different name. Prior to Northwestern, I worked at Loyola University, then at Northwestern. So this is my second stint, And then 22 years at DePaul University. That's where I always say I cut my teeth and I grew up as a professional. Where Mary Catherine Woodson, who is doing this, was an RA for me. We could tell stories about that on another day. And I am a proud Chicagoan, okay, suburb technically, but I have been primarily here and did both my degrees at Loyola University Chicago. Pleased to be here.
Megan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Megan Becker. I serve as the Director of Residential Life at Virginia Commonwealth University. Go Rams. I have been here at VCU for starting my 11th year in my third role here at VCU. Prior to VCU, I hail from Glakuho and I was at Western Illinois University for 7 years before joining CHO. So that's a little bit about my journey. And prior to that, I guess I did my undergrad at the University of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Kathy.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I did not anticipate being at my house today, so if there's any, domestic interruptions, I apologize. My office flooded this morning, so there's 3 inches of standing water on every surface. Apparently, God wants me to be less attached to things this week. I'm Kathy Bush-Hobgood. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Auxiliary Enterprises at Clemson University in scenic Clemson, South Carolina. My areas that I work with include university housing, dining, parking and transportation, the university bookstores, and our brand new child care center. I've been telling people maybe a few years from now, I'll have enough perspective to talk about what it was like to open a child care center during COVID, but that's a different presentation. I've been at Clemson for 17 years. That was not my plan. Clemson was my 3 to 5 year plan. That has turned out to be a place that has really invested in me and allowed me to make contributions to their mission as well. Previous to that, I worked at the University of Florida for 11 years. And prior to that, I worked at Albion College in Michigan, which is here in the state of Michigan, if you do the Michigan hand signal. My undergraduate degree is from the University of Iowa, go Hawks. And my master's degree is from Western Illinois University. And I'm originally from Chicago, inside the city, Deb, not the suburbs.
Thank you. Patty.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So excited to be here with you all. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a proud first-gen graduate student. I'm currently working on my PhD, and November 8th is National First Gen Day. So happy First Gen Day to all those that are first generation students. So I currently serve as the foundation chair for the Aku Hawaii Foundation. I'm also a past president of Aku Hawaii and have served on the executive board for a number of years as well. And I currently serve at the University of Alabama at Birmingham as the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs Director of Operations. So what that means is I have the areas that I work most closely with: housing, dining, student media, assessment and planning, marketing, communications, our student center, and all of our capital projects and renovations that we do for the division. Originally, my home region was Glakuho, and now I'm in the CHO region. I did my undergrad at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, did my master's work at EIU, Eastern Illinois University, and then traveled to Albright College, a small private college in Reading, Pennsylvania. Then came back to the Midwest and worked at Ball State University, then at Northern Illinois University, and now I'm in my 8th year at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'm working on my PhD at Indiana State University. So happy to be with y'all.
Thank you. Crystal.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Crystal Lay. I am the Director for Campus Living Community Staffing at Northern Arizona University. Proud Chicagoan and first-gen human. Yes, from the city, Deb. I did a pretty traditional path of being an RA, a grad assistant, resident director. I started my full-time work at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, which was fantastic. I then did some time at a school in Wisconsin, a smaller school, worked at Sonoma State University, Berkeley, Colorado Boulder, kind of have been all over. And so my home now again is in the Aimho region, and again, very strong roots back to Glakuho, my first home. So excited to be here. The other thing I'll add is that I am the current chair-elect for the ACUOI Mid-Level Leadership Institute, and registration is now open.
Great, thank you. Thank you all so much for your introduction. So our first question for the panel is, the conversation of earning a terminal degree is one that will last for the ages. How did you decide to pursue or not a terminal degree? And Shana, we will start with you.
Excellent. So this was a challenging question for me in my life trajectory. I really thought that I did not want to get my doctorate. I worked at Temple for 8 years and watched everyone around me, all of my friends, all of my colleagues, including RDs, get their degree. And I told myself that I was going to choose going the professional association, professional involvement route. And that has been wildly successful for me. I do believe it's given me exposure in a professional network that I would not have had otherwise, including my leadership in Makuho. Jackie and I are both past presidents of Makuho. So I know there's a lot of Glakuho people, but Makuho was amazing as well. That really propelled me into my work in ACUOI. And as I said, I work with Patty. I'm the outgoing past chair on the foundation, and that has been really rewarding for me professionally, and has actually made the difference for me as far as making connections and getting out there, presenting nationally, all the things. And so it has been successful. I will say this, in my last search, I interviewed at the University of Denver and another school that I'll not mention the name. And I was a finalist at both. Obviously, I got the job at DU. But when I pulled out of the other search, the person said to me, "Do you recognize you're the only one who's a finalist who doesn't have their doctorate? And like, you should be, you should reconsider your choices," right? And so I was like, well, made my choice. However, I appreciate that. So I do recognize I'm at a place in my career as an executive director or going for assistant, associate vice president level positions where many of my colleagues have more years of experience than me possibly, and have a degree. And so I decided, as I joined the DU family here after a year, I'm in my second year of my doctoral program here for EDD in our higher education program.
Thank you. Dr. Becker, would you like to chime in?
Sure. So I decided to pursue my EDD within my first year of transitioning over to Virginia Commonwealth University. I was in my first year, having switched regions, having switched institutions. It was a lot of change, and I was trying to figure out what was next. And, had started making connections at the university. They came and presented at our division meeting and was like, "Here's this capstone project. You can get it done in 3 years." And I really was like, I could give 3 more years to this institution. Because once again, I didn't think I'd be here for 11 years, but I was like, I've only been here a year. I can do 3 more. That's a good amount of time serving an assistant director role. And it was a very structured program. And so honestly, I was at a place in my life where I was single. I was like, what else do I have to lose, right? Like, this is something I can fill my time with. And so that's honestly where I was like, what's next? Trying to figure it out. So I kind of filled that void in life with education back in 2015 and kind of thought I had a plan, and then things changed and I've stayed here. So that's honestly kind of how I ended up doing it.
Great. Thank you. Patty?
So I had a very kind of serendipitous way to kind of lead to the doctoral program. I'm in a PhD program. But originally my plan was similar to Shana, and just going, you know what, I've had amazing opportunities and amazing professional development opportunities through both Glakuho, Makuho, and now Akuho'ai, serving on the executive board. And then when I finished my past presidency, I was kind of like, okay, now what? So I had served also as the co-director for a global institute, the South African Housing Training Institute. And I was kind of like, all right, I need to have my what's next. And so I thought, okay, I'll start this PhD program. And so I did that, and I specifically chose a program in the Midwest so that family would be able to attend graduation, because all of my family is still located in Wisconsin. I'm the only one that's outside of the state, youngest of 5, so I'd be the only one in my family getting a doctoral degree. I'm the only daughter in my family that has gone to higher ed. And so it just kind of said, all right, this is the next thing for me as far as how I'm going to engage professionally. And so I decided to do that. And I've finished all my classes, and now I'm in dissertation phase, which, as someone has already said, can be a long phase, and sometimes can be a lonely phase, but I don't want to get ahead of some other questions that happen later on. But that's a little bit about my story.
Great, thank you. And Kathy, we'll move over to you.
So when people ask me this question, I actually say to them, I haven't decided, because I don't feel like I ever made a decision that wasn't something I wanted. It's just never been the right time for me. As a new professional at the University of Florida, at that time, my decision would have had to be to drive 2 hours to Tallahassee to go to class. And I just was not willing or able, whichever one is in my memory, to be able to do that during that time frame. There wasn't a program at UCF at that time. So it was like, okay, well, maybe at my next stop. And then I ended up staying at Florida longer than I meant to. And that by the time I moved to Clemson, in 2006, I was relatively newly married, in my mid-30s, and really more focused on baby making, because that was what that phase of life was about. I wanted to have a family, and I didn't feel like I could do both at the same time. And then was able to progress in my career in ways that allowed me to continue to move along without having a terminal degree. And then in 2019, through a university reorganization, I was relocated from the Division of Student Affairs into the Division of Finance and Operations, where this conversation is not happening. Finance and Operations is very focused on skill sets, outcomes, in a way that makes me think maybe if I wanted to get another degree, I might consider an MBA, maybe in data analytics, or something in that area. But I also have this romantic thought in my head that maybe there'll be a magical time in my life where it makes sense to do the PhD. One of my good friends is Dr. Shannon Staten, who started her PhD when her daughter moved out of the house to go to college, and completed it for the love of learning and adding to the academic body of knowledge, which feels like something I would still really love to do. So I'm in the not yet decided, but it's going okay category.
Thank you. Deb?
So I think I used to be where you were, Kathy. I haven't decided, but I've decided. And I think I decided a bit ago. When I moved back, I was in Washington, D.C. for a period of time, and thought that I was actually going to go to Maryland, like had gotten accepted, and thought, oh, this is where I'll get my PhD. Susan Komovitz is there. I mean, it was like this great program. And then I had a child and had the opportunity to move back to Chicago, and so that wasn't happening. And then I got back here and I thought, I should do this. I'm from academia. My dad was a college professor. My mom is a college dean. So it felt like that was what I was supposed to do. So I took all 4 classes that you could take before declaring. And then had a conversation with my dad. He goes, so why are you doing this again? I go, I think because I'm supposed to. And he said, but do you want to? He said, because a PhD, and you know, he obviously had one college professor. He said, a PhD in the end was about persistence. And it was really less even about the discipline that I had chosen, but I just needed to get it done. And I said, oh, I don't want that to be me. And so I made a really conscious decision after taking those 4 courses that was it. I love learning, but I feel like I can continue to do that in other ways. Like so many people that are on this call, as a former ACUHO executive board member for 7.5 years up through the presidency, like I think once you have the exposure and people know you outside of your institution. So I'm in a standing desk, and so I can move a lot more than the people who are sitting. So I apologize if it's distracting. I was like, should I sit or stand? I'm standing. And so I made a really conscious decision that that's where I was going to put my energy. I knew that I always wanted to be a practitioner. That's where I'm at my best, is in mentoring other people. And not that I don't think I would have something to add to the body of knowledge, but my skill set is in the mentoring and the leading, and so that decision, I made that decision. That's a number of years ago.
Thank you. Dr. Lay.
I just want to say, I think Deb is standing because you're outstanding. So I decided to pursue my degree because I think I felt some pressure in my first full-time job because of where I was. I was at UIUC, prestige, research. All of my RAs were going to be lawyers and doctors. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I remember sitting in meetings and listening to folks talk, and I would have a thesaurus, like, what words are they saying? I was just in this space of, not really sitting in, you just got a master's, right? It was, how do I take it to the next level and make sure I had a seat at table? So that's where the seed was planted, was based on the type of institution I was at and the meetings I was a part of and wanting more of that. I started a PhD program at UW-Milwaukee that turned into a second master's because I had 2 kids that were, under 2.5 years old. I had moved across the country from Wisconsin to California, and it just didn't make sense. And you couldn't do a PhD online at that time. They were like, Crystal, you've done 33 credits. We're proud of you, and you can't continue. You have to make a decision. So I was really fortunate to turn that into a second master's. But then the more I thought about what I wanted, and wanted to really be a model for my kiddos, I actually applied and was able to get into the PhD program at Miami, Ohio, so Miami University. And I was like, I just need to finish. I had this original goal of get a PhD by 30, but then that just didn't make sense because I had to make a decision, and I'm happy with that, of like, my kids are going to be this age for a certain amount of time, and I didn't want to consume myself and miss out on some of their formative years by having my face in a book. And so, yeah, it was institution type. And again, just wanting to learn and also finishing. So.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing a little bit about you, a little bit more of a deeper dive into your choices and your trajectory and your experiences. So as we move on, this question will first be for Kathy and Deb to answer. And then, of course, if anybody else wants to chime in, if not, then we'll move on. So the question is, what are experiences you've had or sought out that have helped you become a qualified candidate for advanced leadership roles? And you all kind of touched on this a little bit in your introduction. So if you have anything additional to add. And then the second part is, what challenges do you feel you have had by not having a terminal degree? And I'll also place this in the chat. So Kathy, if you want to kick it off, that'd be great.
Absolutely, thanks. So I would say a couple of things. I was reflecting on the comment that Shayna had related to, you're really like in the PhD. When I got my first director level job at Clemson, I found out later that the other 3 finalists that came to campus were all men and all had PhDs. And I don't know if that says something about me or about them, but I chose to feel fabulous about that. Only because, it spoke to the level of preparation that I had invested in that role. And in that case, the AVP that was hiring me at the time was somebody that I knew from CHO. She had been CHO president, the fabulous Verna Howell, for folks that know Verna. when I was CO secretary. So she had seen me build programs, create models, communicate things in a fashion that was important to be able to do that, and had kept up with me in my career at the University of Florida during that time frame. And I can't help but think that that really meant something in that process, in addition to, certainly the work that I had done to prepare for the interview process. Although I haven't chosen to do a PhD at this point, I do identify as a scholar practitioner and as a lifelong learner. I need to be out there learning. I need to be reading from our publications. I need to be contributing to that. It's not atypical for me to author an article for the Talking Stick or to present at conferences, because I think that's important for people to know what your voice is, where are your areas of expertise, and how you're adding to the body of knowledge, whether that's through true research endeavors or through making meaning of our work together, which really is an intellectual endeavor. And I often say we can all do things, but until we make meaning of them, we're really missing the boat on what mattering means, what belonging means, and how we can move forward from there. So clearly for me, that regional and then national experience was important. I had the opportunity to serve as the chairperson of the Akuhoi Foundation, in addition to a couple of regional roles, and have been very fortunate to be elected to your Akuhoi president-elect role. So I'll be serving as Akuhoi president in 2025 in scenic Columbus, Ohio. Come hang out with us. We're going to have a great time. But that, I think, is opportunities that have come that have allowed me to tell the story on my campus of my level of expertise, and it's a credential, right? When I mentor younger professionals, I always talk with them about, there are academic credentials, there are professional credentials, there are certifications, and what matters, depending on your audience, is how you're telling your story. Some campuses, you will always need an advanced academic credential, and if you want to work on that campus, you need to get started on that process. But there may be other campuses that value things differently, and other types of departments on campus that look for different skill sets. And it's important to know what all of those are.
Thank you. Deb?
So I think, when I think about this, about what experience is, I don't know if this is a good or a bad, but, I have been in the Chicago area, back in the Chicago area now for 30, my son's 33, so it must be 31 years that I'm back here. And so when you are in a city like Chicago that has multiple options for higher ed, all the way out to DeKalb, where I think the first place is where I met Patty, when she was at Northern, to U Chicago, and then north to where I am at Northwestern. You have the opportunity to get connected quickly to other professionals who do what you do. So in Chicago, it's not called this now, but it was the Chicago Area Small College Housing Association, but it didn't matter what size your institution was, you could still be a part of it. And we met monthly, religiously, and had professional development and had networking, and as an introvert, because I identify as a high introvert, those, networking opportunities to meet people got my name out there. I became a director, frankly, by accident. I was in a position at Loyola or at DePaul, and literally one day, this is a true story, August 27th, it's a day that I will always remember, 2002, the division decided to split residence life into res education and housing. And the director of Res Life was going to stay in housing, and they needed a director for the Res Ed side, and I got it by default. And it was a horrendous first year, and I made the worst mistakes that I've ever made as a professional in that first year. And I thought to myself, you got to get your together and figure this out. And so I used my networks. I see Michelle, you're laughing at me. So I used my networks in the city to help educate me on the things that I didn't know, particularly things around budgeting, all those things that go along sort of with the more seen with the auxiliary realm. So, it is for me, the fact that I was in Chicago for such a long period of time that really helped me qualify to move into these roles. I've not applied for positions outside of Chicago. You know, my husband's here, my kids are here, and I'm staying here. Okay, and frankly, I'm 65 now, so I can walk away on any given day. I tell my boss that all the time. Don't make me have a bad day, because you know I can retire. I don't feel like there really have been, people are always really surprised. Like, I really don't feel like I have been prevented from doing anything that I wanted to do because I don't have a degree. Some people are very surprised because Northwestern has a reputation. We are considered an elite institution. And some people would say, well, you know, you're in a senior director role and you don't have a doctorate. No, I don't. And I mean, it's not like I go around and say, yay, I don't have a doctorate, but I think my skill set speaks for itself. The experiences that I have had internationally because of a Hawaii put me in a place where other folks who might have the doctorate don't have that international experience and understanding of what that is, both for students who come to us and the things that we can learn from our colleagues around the world. And so I think that has also really benefited me in my role. So.
Great. Thank you. So for time purposes, I'm gonna move on to the next question, but a couple quick takeaways, just as you both were sharing for everybody. So we are obviously all connected to Hawaii because we are on this Zoom, right? Which is fantastic. And certainly when we were doing the intros, everybody mentioned some shout outs to the different regions. So just another shout out, right? Like if you're only connected with the Hawaii, maybe think about reaching out to your regional folks, certainly to get connected. And, you know, I think it was Kathy that mentioned, but Deb, you mentioned it a little bit too, about like building your network, right? And so we are, I think there's like 30+-ish people, almost 40 people on here. And so now we are all connected, right? Some of us know each other. Some of us, we might just be meeting for the first time. So I want to invite and encourage you to copy your LinkedIn profile into the chat so this group of amazing women can stay connected past this Zoom conversation. So moving on to our next question, and I will ask Dr. Lay and Dr. Becker to jump in here. If you can share if you've ever felt pressured to get a degree, how did you decide to take the leap to start a program? And as a woman with intersecting identities, are there pressures that you felt in pursuing your terminal degree?
So I think the pressure felt more societal. So as a Black woman, that's how I predominantly identify. And then as a mom, I found that there were tables where I may have had a seat, but my microphone wasn't on. That's how I like to frame it. Or there were opportunities I was not getting that I have attributed to identity. I was in a search process at one point, and I was up against a white male with a PhD who had many less years of experience than myself and was also described as far more superior. And I said, never again will I be in a space where someone who is not as qualified, in my opinion, will get a role because of identity markers. And the thing I had control over was education, right? I am happy being a Black woman, and now I also have a PhD. So I did not want my education to be a lingering thought in my mind, as if I did that or had that, would I have not gotten, you know, this particular opportunity. So that was the first thing, thinking about identity. I don't want to create a new table. I want to be at the table. And so that was important to me. And I feel like this doctorate gives me access to do that in a different way. The second piece that felt like pressure was, you know, the experiences that my kiddos have had in schools. You know, I've worked at PWIs, predominantly white institutions, and sometimes those are in predominantly white areas and school systems. And so trying to navigate spaces and experiences that my kiddos have been exhausting and tiring. And so my dissertation is actually for my kids, and it's on looking at white teacher identity and how that impacts Black students in their classroom. And so my entire work is about my kids and the things I've seen, and hoping to improve education for teacher programs. And so I think that was the other motivation. I felt like that was something I had to and could do to support my kiddos. And so I think I also feel like you know, maybe it's a perception more than reality, but I feel like I can be more of my authentic self. You know, I don't have to code switch. I don't have to subscribe to professionalism because I have my letters. And so that must mean something if I was able to complete this doctoral program. And so those were my motivations. A little bit of pressure, but definitely happy with my decision to go that route.
I think from my perspective, part of the reason, you know, I was motivated, I think was because of my previous institution and my current institution. When I got here, I saw a lot of male identifying folks sitting at the table. And I wanted to break into that space. And so I saw that as a way to hopefully get myself at the table to have those conversations. You know, my first Glakuho, you know, Julie Payne Kirchmeier, Dr. Julie Payne Kirchmeier, she was president that year. And I just remember sitting in the crowd being like, I want to do that one year, right? And then years after that, I just kept seeing male identifying folks serving in that presidency role. And then, you know, as I left Glakuho, I kept seeing more female identifying folks. But even when I got to CHO, you know, like, but there's CHO former presidents on here, which is great. But I think it's just continuing to make sure there's representation at that table. And so I saw that as an opportunity as a first gen child to also earn that for my family who had worked so hard to provide me the experiences and the college education, and, you know, earn that as well as, you know, as Crystal talked about, like, you know, future generations. Right now I have kids and, you know, very excited about the opportunities that hopefully, you know, I can expose them to as well. I will say that sometimes imposter syndrome kicks in. And even though I have a doctorate, I still show up to tables and like, do I want to turn on this microphone or not? Do I want to speak? Is it time for me to speak? So even though you earn that degree, it doesn't, you know, just immediately strip away that imposter syndrome. It doesn't immediately earn you that street cred. You know, your time and your energy and your work ethic that you put into building your reputation and your network also comes along with the work that you put into a doctorate. So it doesn't immediately give you this badge for you to flex. It's a both and. So.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing. So moving on, the next question, I'm going to ask Shayna to kick it off and then Patty to chime in. What are the challenges you face in your journey and how do you stay motivated in your educational journey moving forward?
Yeah, I think Kathy kind of alluded to some of the challenges. I didn't get my degree when I was at Temple because I thought you're too busy, right? You have so much going on. And then I didn't understand what busy was, right? I came to the University of Denver and I rebuilt an organization. And the minute I think we have it together, something else happens, right? And so that's never going to go away. I think the longer you're in your career, when you advance, there's always going to be something. One of my friends was wanted to get engaged and went to my father and said, is this the right time to get married? My dad says, never a right time to get married or have kids. And I'm going to add or get a doctorate because you will find things to make you busy. So I'm busy, right? And so, but if this is something I care about, I believe in, I want to invest in, I make time for it, right? Like we make time for relationships and everything else, you will find time for it. Add on top of that, I'm insane. I got a puppy on top of already having a dog. So make that make sense. So it's, you know, that's a challenge, like managing your life. But I do think this was the ideal time for me. I transitioned from being in the East Coast and now I'm on the West Coast. I don't have as many family members here. I don't have any family here. I don't have as many friends here. I do have a small little village, but I have more, let's say, social time that I reinvested in my education. And how do I stay motivated? So I decided to apply partially because my sister, after dropping out of college after her sophomore year, because she wanted to make money, I tried to talk her out of it. But we're from Trenton, New Jersey, and sometimes that allure of, oh, I'm gonna get a job. And then she had babies and then realized she was working for people that she believed she was smarter than. And so she went back to school. So it was a 6-year journey for my sister to get her undergraduate degree. And after she did that, I said, if you go for your master's degree, I'll go for my doctorate. And do y'all know she applied and got accepted? And then so there's the thing. So I had to apply for my doctorate. But my family keeps me motivated. My niece is seeing me, and the idea that my aunt could be a doctor is something that they know that I'm pursuing this. And so it keeps me moving. My oldest niece came to my house in Denver, and she was like, this is the life I want to live. And that made me proud, that she sees herself in a way that maybe she didn't from the community that we come from. Right. And so that's what pushes me and keeps me going and motivated. Now all of you know, I've been very hush hush about this. I didn't know I was going to get outed in this. So now that everybody knows, I'm also one of those people who I feel like once I commit to something and people know I'm doing it, I have to follow through. Unfortunately, my father raised me that way. So there's I'm in a Greek organization, and there's a poem, See It Through, right? And so that's something that I've committed to. And so something I'm going to push through and do. And so, and then also having so many amazing colleagues around me, like Crystal and friends, and who have their degree and have done it, and to be a woman of color and to be in a senior level position and to be able to maybe put Dr. Olson out in the world is something that I would be proud to have as part of my career, my trajectory. So yeah, that's what keeps me going.
Love it, Trina. Love it. So when I think about being in the midst of the doctoral journey and thinking about the different positions that I've been able to garner, because I had the experience similar to how Deb explained her experience, that you're able to think differently because of some of the professional associations that you've been involved in. I mean, that's huge. That makes a huge, huge difference. But some of the challenges that I've had along the way, similar to Shana in the sense of trying to balance it all. I'd started a degree when I was at NIU and thought, okay, I'm going to stay there and finish the degree. And then this AVP position came open, and here I sit at UAB. And at that time, NIU didn't have a distance education. So, it got to a point where I was like, all right, I need to start this. But some of the challenges more recently for me included more family challenges. As I shared earlier, I'm further away from family here in Alabama versus them all being in Wisconsin. And 2 years ago this month, I lost my mom, and that was a huge hit for me that really took a toll. And then a year ago, my husband actually suffered some health issues that really, I think, derailed me in the sense that I just needed to focus differently. I needed to think about, okay, family is really the priority, not, as someone said, the letters after your name at that point. And so I needed to really focus there. And, if I'm being honest, it wasn't until maybe last month that I really realized the impact that also had on me. Because, all of us as women are just in that role of caretaker, and you just do it and you do it. And then all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a second, there was some things that occurred to me during this time frame. And so for me, it also is family that keeps me motivated. The little notes that I get from my brothers, the I remember when I came back from United Arab Emirates, I was able to travel to UAE for a Kuhoai. And my brother at the time sent me a text and he said, thanks for being such a great role model for my kids. And that just touched my heart so much. And, you know, there I was in the middle of the airport, just kind of tearing up and crying. But this is similar in the sense that, you know, I want my nieces and nephews and my great nieces and nephews now to see that it doesn't matter where you are within your life. If there's something that you want to do, go and do it. And don't be afraid to take the risk and jump in and realize that there's going to be people around you to support you. There's going to be safety nets along the way. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, you get into the dissertation phase and that can be very lonely. And I'm sure that both Crystal and Megan can attest to that it gets to a point where you don't have that cohort all the time that you're relying on for classes to say, okay, let's collaborate on this, collaborate on that. You can do some, you know, some virtual writing together and things like that, but it's still your project that you're working on. And so that consistent opportunity to stay motivated within the realm, but also allow yourself the ability to reprioritize as you need to, because life happens and it's important to ensure that you're prioritizing the right thing for you at that time and not allowing others to prioritize it for you. So that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing as you answer that question. So I know we are pushing the 4 o'clock hour and some of you might have somewhere to be, so please feel free to log off as you need to. But as we wrap up, I just want to ask the panelists if they have any final thoughts. And so I won't necessarily call your name to ask you, but if you have anything to say to our wonderful for our wonderful panelists that are on here, feel free to unmute yourself and we can popcorn around. And then for those of you joining us, if you have any questions that you want to ask these amazing individuals, feel free to plop it in the chat and we can tackle what we can with the remaining time that we have. So we'll start with final thoughts.
I just want to echo what Patty said about make your decision. Don't make anybody else's decision because, and make sure you're making it for all the right reasons, and know that if those reasons change, that's okay to take a different route or a different timeline.
And I would add to that, you know, so many times, and we do this in our work worlds as well. We think, okay, if we're going to do a new initiative, it has to be an add-on, as opposed to what could I stop doing in order to make time for this thing to happen for you. One of our several people on the call know our Kuhoai CEO, Mary De Niro, who is famous for saying, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. So let's be clear about what are our priorities. And your priorities are going to shift in each chapter, you know, and like many things that are easy to say but hard to do, you know, figuring out each chapter is okay if they look different from each other.
I would add that support is necessary if you decide to pursue a doctoral degree. You have to have your network. You have to have people who are supporting you and creating space for that to happen. There are moments, like Patty said, that are solo moments and journeys. But this is a community effort. I think the other thing too, I don't know if there wasn't the identity pieces, if I would have gone out there and said, yes, I need a doctorate. And so for me, naming that inclusivity, diversity, equity is so important in the work that we do, because I know that heavily laid into why I needed for me to get a doctorate to feel more credible in our spaces. And so I would just like to name that we have to keep doing the work for folks to, you know, for everyone to have a space and feel like they can be heard in the work that we continue to do to support not just our students, but each other in this work.
All right. Any questions from the group? You can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just ask.
I have a quick question. I might have missed this because I got here late, but did you all talk about the EDD versus PhD conversation? Do you have any insight on that? Thank you.
We did not touch on that, but would anybody like to answer the question or give any thoughts, advice, or suggestions?
I will.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I was just going to say really quickly, I had a choice. I was encouraged to do the PhD here, but I, like Deb, see myself as a scholar practitioner. And so I didn't feel like I needed to have the PhD. But I will say now that I'm in it, it's very similar journeys. So we're all in the same classes. The only difference is I think they have like maybe 12 more credits than I do. And the classes look a little different. But I do think if you want to teach at some point, but I know so many people who are clinical professors who have EDDs. So at this point, it's really, it depends on like what letters you want, I guess, behind your name.
Yeah, I think there's this constant argument of what's better. They're both doctorates, y'all. They are both. I bought into PhD because at the time EDDs were just becoming a thing. And so I am one of the person, I need to see it moving, shaking, walking for years before I do a thing. And so I leaned into that. And I do think people perception wise treat you differently based on what letters, but ultimately it's what type of work and what's the length of your program, right? Are you wanting to be more practitioner, more scholar? Do you want to do research? Do you want to teach? You can teach with both. So it's really about your persistence and the program and the faculty and what you want to get out of your experience. I think it's a personal decision.
Thank you. We probably have time for maybe one more question if anybody has. Oh, I see a hand. Shanice?
Hello, hi. Hello, everyone. Good evening or afternoon. Shanice Williams, University of Texas at Tyler. I had a quick question. I'm getting my PhD in human resource development in the dissertation phase. And I just wanted to know, just from you all, how did you go about picking, your doctoral degree if you have one? So did you want to stay in higher ed or higher ed leadership, or did you pick one based off of being in a general form like business? If hopefully that question makes sense.
I'll jump in. I chose mine based on wanting to be in a higher ed program and also the faculty that were at the institution. Mary Howard Hamilton is at Indiana State University. I think very, very highly of her. Actually, had served on the ACUHO board with her previously, and she had wanted me to do it then. I really looked at the faculty and also looked at what did I want to do with the degree.
Mine is in leadership, culture, and curriculum. I knew I wanted to do a little bit more with K through 12. And so I went that direction of educational leadership.
My degree is going to be in higher education, and DU is a good school, and I was here. So I'll be very transparent about that.
Thank you.
I think I missed a question in the chat. So since we have like 4-ish minutes left, I'll backtrack.
Can I jump in one more thing?
Oh, yes.
I think Shayna's point is a really good one, that if you've got a great program at your institution and you have educational credit through your benefits that you can take advantage of, do it. If it's a program that you want and you can persist in, again, you want to make sure that you can persist in it, just not because it's there. Because otherwise you won't succeed if it's just, okay, it's there and I'm going to do it. But take advantage of those extra benefits that are offered to you as educational benefits.
Thank you. So the question that was in the chat is, what did you consider in choosing your doctoral program? So if anybody wanted to add anything. I feel like we touched on it a little bit as people answered, and the question was from Elizabeth. I don't know if she's still here, if she popped off, but if there's any other insight for her.
You want to pick a program where your research topic is represented by your instructors. If you know there's an area you want to study, someone has to be passionate or studying that in your program. That would be A. B, get it paid for. Super important. And then I say reputation of the program too. You want to make sure there's longevity. It's going to be there because you hear about programs closing down, departments disappearing. So you don't want to start something and then you're not able to finish the program. Those would be my 3 things I would add.
Thank you. So we are approaching 2 minutes to the hour, but Shayna, wrap it on up for us.
No, I was going to say, I would echo what Crystal said. And they were very deliberate in my program about matching me with an advisor who focused on organizational structure. And also I was interviewed by someone who also worked at a women's college like I did. So they were very intentional about reading my application and connecting me with faculty in my program that supported what could be my future research in my work. And so, you know, as much as my program is not as well known, they were very deliberate in how they support their students, and that was important to me.
Thank you. I mean, we can certainly stay on for a little bit while, but I just want to be mindful, you know, of time. And I know people have places to get. So please feel free to log off. I know that there were a couple additional questions in the chat, and I am sorry for those that asked that we didn't get to it. But like I said, feel free to stay connected to everybody through LinkedIn or emails. But thank you so much for joining us. Panelists, thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to provide your knowledge, insight, and wisdom to the group. And thank you to the network for the opportunity to allow me to moderate. And again, to Deanna and Michelle for all you do as the co-chairs for the network. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you all enjoy whatever is left in your day.